Welcome back. Well, Defence Minister Richard Marles has refused to say what percentage of GDP Labor will spend on defence. This is ahead of the PM's long-awaited visit to the United States. Richard Marles announced an additional $12 billion in funding for a submarine base, but he wouldn't say how this affects defence spending percentages. Take a look.
We've not really been focused on that as a measure, and partly because, in fact, there are different measures around the world of percentages of GDP. I mean, if you look at the way in which NATO accounts for its own spending in terms of percentage of GDP, based on that metric, our spending on GDP today in terms of defence is around 2.8%. And so precisely because there are differences around the place, we actually are focused on the process that the Prime Minister has articulated to think about what is the need that we have and then to resource it.
OK, so that clears that up. The irony is it was actually the Albanese government itself which introduced the GDP measure in last year's National Defence Strategy, promising a jump in investment by 2033. This has certainly raised some eyebrows among critics today.
The French submarines, the Japanese ones, we've got something going with the UK. We've got a lot of waste and people want to know where their money... People don't mind spending money on defence for the nation. What they care about is that it's being wasted and there is too much waste.
Joining me now is foreign editor at The Australian, Greg Sheridan. Greg, what is going on with Richard Marles' refusal to talk about GDP as it relates to defence spending? What happened to transparent government?
Well, James, there's never been anything transparent about this government and defence. Firstly, Richard Marles says the government doesn't think about defence as a percent of GDP. Every defence document is absolutely riddled with defence as a percent of GDP. And it's been that way for forever and ever and ever, because it's one limited but useful way of measuring a nation's commitment to defence. And what he doesn't want to admit is that defence spending was 2% of GDP when Albanese was elected, which I think indicates gross dereliction on the part of the previous coalition government. And after 3.5 years of the worst strategic circumstances since World War II, according to the government, it's still 2% of GDP. And I can tell you what effect that $12 billion over 10 years makes on a percentage of GDP. No effect at all. It's about $1 billion a year. Now, who knows, between inflation and the rest of it, how our nominal GDP is going to go up over 10 years. But $1 billion in 10 years' time will be, and it is already, much less than 0.01% of GDP. And in any event, even more than that, James. Wait, there's more. It's all flim-flam anyway, because what they announced they're going to spend it on, the Henderson Defence Precinct, they won't even finish the planning and scoping process for that until 2027. So this allegedly new money probably won't start going out the door until 2028. And that's if everything goes well. So the deep, tremendous, straining urgency of this government to get things done means that sometime in its third term, it may actually begin to spend this notional $12 billion, which it, can announce without having to actually do anything about it. It'll be interesting to see if it even appears in the forward estimates.
Indeed. All right, I want to move on to Europe. Romania has confirmed a Russian drone has breached its airspace. This comes after Poland last week reported 20 Russian drones crossed their border, some of which were shot down by NATO warplanes. Romanian pilots were given permission to shoot the drone down but decided not to, and it eventually crossed into Ukraine. But I wanted to ask you, Greg, this is the second NATO country in a week where Russian drones have incurred. Is this just a coincidence, or is Putin poking the bear here to see what NATO's response will be?
Well, James, one reflection back to our first topic. This demonstrates the utter irresponsibility, I write about this at length tomorrow, of us not having our own defence capabilities. I believe we can rely on the Americans, but the absolute irresponsibility, the abdication of basic duties of government in not having our own serious defence capability, I think this move by Russia into Romania is very sinister indeed, and it's not a word I normally use. They didn't send drones into Polish airspace by accident. They didn't send them into Romanian airspace by accident. The pattern we've seen with the Russians is that they take what seem to be precedent-breaking, precedent-making, strange, very, very provocative moves and see what kind of reaction they get. Now, we're getting tremendous strategic confusion out of Trump. Remember the Trump-Putin summit a few weeks back? He said there was going to be peace in Ukraine, there would be a meeting between Putin and Zelensky. Trump has been threatening extra sanctions on Russia for months, nothing ever happens. And Putin, I think, is confident that he's getting no reaction out of the United States. The Europeans are better than we are on defence, but they're not that good, and they are scrambling to know what this means by Putin. Is he getting ready for some new provocation? Is he playing with their heads? I can't pretend that I know what Putin is doing, but I'd be very confident that it's deliberate, not accidental.
Greg, we've only got a couple of minutes before we need to go to a break, but I really wanted to ask you about Australia's decision to spend billions of dollars on new weapons and military equipment for Papua New Guinea as part of a treaty with our countries working together. Just two questions. Is this a good idea for Australia? And are we right to be spending billions equipping the PNG military when, as you've already pointed out, our own is underfunded?
Well, James, you'd want to have a good look at what we've really promised. If we're as good with the PNG promises as we are with our own promises, it'll be kind of 100 years of solitude before they see a dollar of it. But Papua New Guinea is immensely important to us, immensely important. The Melanesian world has maybe 10 million people or more in it now, and we pay it very little attention. Every now and again, an Australian government falls in love with Papua New Guinea all over again. I think this is a good thing. I'd rather the Albanese government was spending its time on Papua New Guinea than trying to solve the problems of Palestine. And given how much money the Albanese government spends on absolute junk, if it's willing to spend a couple of $1 billion to help the PNG Defence Force, I think that's a good thing too.
I think you're absolutely right, Greg. It's always a joy to have you on the program. I appreciate you coming on tonight. Thanks again.